I was going to talk about Antarctica today on the Slice. Then I said, now, let's talk about Hollow Earth theory. Maybe Flat Earth theory. I got shows right. I have tons of shows. The research has been done, but the shows haven't been put together yet. Mostly because at the time I was rebuilding my studio here and getting new equipment and items like that, little tidbits. And then Parafest came up, and I had to get an out of place artifact presentation in order, which went well. But then, of course, as usual, when I got to the event, my hardware issues went berserk, and I'm not even exaggerating. So anyway, I noticed on mainstream media like Facebook and stuff like that, we've been getting some of these old photos that I've debunked in other shows about it not being part of a time traveler thing, such as the cell phones and the tablets and the Egyptian stuff and all that. Okay, so today I'm going to make the show about time travel. Possible or not. Now, we all know that a form of time travel is possible by putting someone in suspended animation and basically just waking them up in the future. Now, technically, they would have, in their perspective, time traveled. Our perspective, they were just a piece of equipment sitting in a corner until the time was right. Okay, so what is it that time is? Is it perspective? Is it actual movement through space? It is movement through space, especially if the conventional science is all prescribed to everything moving in space. Nothing is truly stationary. It's moving in relative position. So if that's true, then time is movement. It's the amount of integers between point A and point B of movement is what it boils down to. I think that even animals and insects have a form of perception of time. It might be genetically controlled, or maybe even some kind of subconscious counting going on. Either way, they use they use a clock of sorts. We all do. It's a biorhythmic, seasonal, planetary, magnetic, gravitational effect. Okay, so let's agree on that. Okay, so if you in fact wanted to see a point in time, say last week, in theory you would have to actually travel back to the location you would have been at that point in the universe, your relative position. However, I think that the past is preserved as a vibration, a resonance. So conceivably, I think it's probably more likely than being able to travel back. It might be more feasible to make a machine to read the resonance in the vibrational field in order to recreate events that may have happened there. Just think of how many cold cases we could solve if you could solve the ability to read a vibration from the past, which some think spirits and ghosts and stuff like that are as a remembrance of the past. Well, if that's the case, it would have to be done with vibrational resonance. It's funny, resonance can be used to do everything from cut rock to travel through time, maybe? Maybe not travel, but maybe look in on. Perhaps there's a device, or we could make a device that's sensitive enough that you can point it at an area, it'll read the resonances there, and then you just dial back the resonances to a time period that you want. Every time period will be there all at once, just at different frequencies. You see where I'm going with this? Every moment in time is a constantly changing frequency. So, let us think about what the possibilities could be if you could take that. I'd like to speak to someone like Dan Williams about this, actually, because there's a lot of different ways to pick up resonance waves, and most people have turned on the radio and heard static. That's actually resonance waves right there in the upper end of the spectrum. Anything that says wave, light, blah blah blah, has a vibration to it. Any wave is a vibration, whether it's a photon or an electron. Still, always, that's the way it is. Sorry. So, I want to point out these right here. Now, these ladies look like they're talking on a cell phone. Well, the picture was dated at 1908, and that year was a big boom in the crystal radio industry. And in the big cities, you had ABC just coming out. The national broadcasting system wasn't far behind. But the American Broadcasting Corporation was going to town with getting radio stations up with the crystal radio fad. And they were putting stations up like crazy, and they were making a heck of a dent on it right exactly when that picture was supposed to be taken. So, actually that's a video, actually, but you know me, I hate copyright claims on my stuff. So, anyway, there's other things though. The Hipster, that's right, the Hipster. We find out that actually that style of sweater is very common in that time period as well. It was an up and coming thing, and most of the people around him, as you can tell, were the generation before him, for the most part. You can tell just by looking at the people. I mean, there was some younger ones, but you know, for the most part, he was the youngest in the picture. I've seen a lot of doctored pictures of this guy where they heightened the coloring and stuff like that. And you don't pay attention to that, I hope. So, there are other stories that I've read about a man who disappears in England and suddenly reappears 50 feet in the air and falls to his death on the street below, out of nowhere. Was he dropped from a plane? Well, no, because they didn't have planes yet. This was back in early days. I'd have to... You can find the BBC... That story there came from a BBC series. It was reprinted in Timelike books called Mysteries of the Unknown or some such thing. Something like that. Magic Mind and... Oh, God. I gave that book series away, unfortunately. But anyway, it's good to go back to for backup information and to prove my point. But which basically is it time travel or is it dimensional travel? That is a good question, and we're going to explore that a little bit. So, other things that you find when you're talking about time travel is there was a fellow that showed up at some point, and he was claiming to be from a certain time period, and he gave a lot of information, and then he disappeared. So, Um, we'll go into some of that here in a minute with a couple of clips that I'll narrate through the pictures. So anyway, my idea is for a couple of us engineers to get together and figure out what we need to do to read a resonant frequency that we can date back in a stepping way. And it'd be very cool if we could somehow recreate a picture from that memory or resonance vibration. Yeah. Interesting. You might have better luck in areas where there's quartz, where you get some kind of reading from the minerals around it. That might be a more likely area to get this kind of thing to work. So, be very wary of the cell phone claims, because there was no cell phone towers. There would have to be like a satellite tower, and time travelers aren't going to have access to that kind of technology. So when they get there, they kind of got to adopt the technology of the day. They're not going to be running around with a cell phone. Who are they going to be talking to? Friggin' the future? I doubt it. And they're certainly not going to be doing it on the main streets in an age where that isn't supposed to be possible. So, people don't use their heads a lot of times. So, let's go into the show and tell section, and we'll pick out different things and talk about the possibility of there actually having been time travel. I would like to time travel. I would love, from a historical point of view, getting the facts straight and all that kind of thing. I would applaud such a move. So anyway, let's take a look at some of these pictures, and we'll see what we can come up with ideas. Okay, folks, thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe and to like and share. Also, you might want to check out Kimberly Wright on Friday nights on the facebook.com/groups/AA Theory, and you go there, join up, and you can listen and join in on the chat about Ancient Aliens shows, X-Files shows, depending on what season we're in, and stuff like that. Okay, also, if you want to go and listen and join in on a video, blogtalkradio.com, you join Clarence Mitchell on Closer Encounters, and you'll find yourself not only part of the show, but you'll be an active participant in an ongoing investigation into the unknown. So do join them there. I will post the site for Matthew Bowers, who's got a great ancient lore site that you will definitely want to check out, because some of that information is not going to be found many other places. And here's that. Go there. I know Weebly is a funny name, but definitely it's a great site. So check that out. And so now let's get on with our informational part of the show. Okay, folks. To travel back in time, you need to follow what is called the closed Timelike curve. This is a world line that is a loop instead the more conventional wavy vertical line. The ordinary world lines start at a given point in space and time, and then it moves into the future like all normal things do. A closed Timelike curve eventually doubles back, traveling into the past until it connects with itself. In his work, The Theory and Practice of Time Travel, Larry Niven notes that the basic motivation for inventing time travel is the same motivation of a child fervently wishing that something had never happened. If they could only change history so that they had hit the baseball to the left instead of the right, it wouldn't have broken old man Smith's picture window. It's the desire for a do-over, in other words. So the primary motive for time travel is to change the past. unsurprisingly, that is also its prime danger. Personally, I just like to see the past. All of the current real-time machines, visualized as thought experiments by real physicists, share a common flaw. You cannot use a time machine to travel to a point in time prior to the construction of that particular time machine. Notice that this time machine, like all other time machines that are allowed by the Einstein theory of gravity, can only take you backward in time to the moment that the machine is turned on, and forward in time to the moment that the machine is turned off. Einstein's laws do not allow a future time machine maker to go back into time to tell himself how to make the machine. Thus, at least one of the possible time machine paradoxes is avoided. So that was from Indistinguishable from Magic by Robert Forward. That was a 1995 book. Now, Larry Niven also makes a good case that in a given universe where time travel is possible, and if using it to change the past is possible, the end result is that time travel will not be invented in that universe. Here it is. This is Niven's law. Given the universe that the universe of discourse permits both time travel and the changing of the past. If that's true, then a time machine will not be invented in that universe. For if a time machine is invented in that universe, somebody will change the past of that universe. There is just too much future subsequent to the invention of a time machine, and too many people with too many good motives for meddling with too many events occurring in too much of the past. In other words, not practical. He goes on saying, if we assume that there is no historical inertia, no conservation of events, then each change makes a whole new universe. Every trip into the past means that all the dice have to be thrown all over again. Every least change changes all the history books, until by chance and endless change we reach a universe where there is no time machine invented, ever, by any species. Then that universe would not change. In other words, the universe keeps changing until it reaches a stable state, and that state is one where no time machines are invented. Okay? So there is that assumption. Now let's assume that there is an inertia to history, that the past tends to remain unchanged, that probabilities change to protect the fabric of events. What is the simplest change in history that will protect the past from interference? That's right, no time machines. So, Niven's law is this. If the universe of discourse permits the possibility of time travel and of changing the past, then no time machine will be invented in that universe. And he printed that up in The Theory and Practice of Time Travel by Larry Niven in 1971. He also points out in the book that time travel violates other laws of physics besides causality. So, if you sent a signal back in time, it would be just as bad, only this time you're violating the law of conservation of energy, which may or may not be disprovable. We'll see where quantum and string physics go with that. But matter and energy are pretty much two aspects of the same thing. And to top it off, physical time travel violates any law of motion, since motion always relates to time. Well, see, this is what, to me, makes time travel possible. I think nature is probably strong. It would just basically just make another universe every time you did something. That's why every time, a lot of time travel shows, do go into that possible, like that, what's that, Time Horizon or whatever it is, that new one. They take that into effect and they know that everything outside is a different universe when they come back. I think it's possible to view the past, but that's based on resonance and electromagnetic memory. Now, this is all well and good. History, I don't believe that we should be allowed to go back in time. Forward, okay. Backwards, no. Backwards, I mean, we're messing with everybody's life there. I'd like to be able to view it, however. And let's talk about some frauds that are out there. For instance, there are a lot of pictures out there of this blonde lady at different historical events. And her name is Flora Borsi. And it's spelled, her last name is spelled Borsi. And she's a famous photographer. She puts herself in all these different historical pictures and then throws them out there as if they're, well, she doesn't. There are people on the internet that are doing YouTube shows. And if you see a YouTube show with her picture in it, them claiming that it's a real evidence, then you might want to pop off because they didn't do their research. This is the lady right here, Flora Borsi, and she's a Hungarian photographer and graphic designer, and she did this new photoshopped series that she put out, taking her inspiration from a Charlie Chaplin movie. She writes, "How would time travel affect life as we know it? Capture the most important events in history," and uploaded it to Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and she did. And if it became real, then we'd be in trouble. So these are all pictures of her in there. Okay. So, now we come to the really big one. You know what I'm talking about? The Chrono Visor. The Chrono Visor is something that the Catholic Church cooked up when magnetic recording medium became widely available. One of the fathers started, well, recording chants from tape, vinyl to tape and onwards, and live recordings and such. And while transferring the tape one night, Gianni hears his father talking to him. Let's take a look at that clip right now of how the Catholic Church acquired a backwards past time viewer.
In 1965, he was working at the Catholic University of Milan, transferring wire recordings of Gregorian chants to the modern medium of magnetic tape. The university archivist, Father Agostino Gemelli, was checking the quality of the tape transfer when he heard the voice of his deceased father on the tail end of one recording. Gemelli's father was not attempting to contact his son from the spirit world. He was arguing with another man about the price of shoe wax. Gemelli's father had been a cobbler. Since the voice did not exist on the original wire recording, Gemelli believed the magnetic tape had captured an event from the past. He believed it to be a reward from God. Father Ernetti, on the other hand, believed this phenomena just might be scientifically reproducible. He petitioned his bishop to assemble a team of scientists to explore the possibility of fabricating a time recorder. Normally, the bishop would not have bothered to consider the fruits of science over the truth of the Bible. But Ernetti was prepared for this objection. Ernetti made a promise to the bishop that his only goal was to obtain an audio recording at the scene of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The deep coffers of the Vatican were used in funding a secret project, tasking some of the most eminent scientists of the age. According to Father Ernetti, this included Werner von Braun, the German rocket engineer who defected to the United States, and J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. The scientific team discovered that sounds and images of past events left a permanent record behind in the residual form of electromagnetic radiation. A device was built to register, amplify, and display the source of these invisible waves. They called it the Chrono Visor. The first test was a visual journey of only 150 years into history. As the vacuum tubes of the Chrono Visor hummed while warming up, a fuzzy picture of Napoleon Bonaparte came gradually into focus, except that there were two of him. The team was mortified. Something was wrong with the machine. But Oppenheimer said no. There is a little-known story that Napoleon sent a body double in his place to suffer the sentence of his final exile on the island of St. Helena. Now, he said, we know for sure the story is true. When these scientists were done experimenting for the day, Father Ernetti would be allowed to use the ChronoVisor freely. He wanted to see and hear musical instruments of old in the process of being played. At first he searched in vain among the marketplaces of ancient Greece. He was looking in the wrong place. He discovered that amphitheaters of the ancients were not used exclusively for presenting plays. They were also the preferred venue for musical concerts. As a Roman Catholic monk, he was also well versed in Latin. That is how Ernetti was able to transcribe the complete script of Thyestes as it was being performed 2 centuries BC. Thyestes was one of the lost plays of Quintus Ennius, the poet laureate of the Roman Republic.
This is Charlotte Keppel. This is Charlotte Keppel. And this is Charlotte Keppel when her machine didn't do what they wanted.
I still cannot believe, and I don't want to be sexist about this, but that an ordinary woman in the 1930s could come up with this incredible machine which goes against all possible scientific theories and get results.
To this day, in our own time, someone as sui generis, shall we say, as Charlotte Keppel, who was so all-embracing, so all-encompassing in the breadth and stature of her gifts, is somehow effectively and consummately written out of history.
What all this is about is a narrative, how we create narratives and how we exclude from narratives. And Charlotte was a classic victim of exclusion. I didn't discover her until I was going through newspaper archives for the 1930s. And I came across this well-publicized young woman who was technologically brilliant, ahead of her time, who was really well known in Ireland.
We see the past all the time. Every time we stare into the nighttime sky at that vast myriad of stars, we're looking into the depths of time. The sheer vastness of space means that it can take millions of years for light to travel from a star to Earth. million light years away from Earth. The supernova we see in that far-off galaxy actually happened 2 million years ago. If we could see the Earth then.
It is 1938, the end of a decade of unprecedented change. Madcap politics, social unrest, dingbat inventions, and exciting new scientific discoveries are all the rage. In the spring of that year, academics from around Europe gather for the presentation of one such discovery at Dublin's Royal Irish Academy. The discovery's author is a 28-year-old Irish woman by the name of Charlotte Keppel. Charlotte is a self-taught scientist. She comes from a long line of crackpot inventors. Obsessed by science from an early age, Charlotte spends her boarding school days fashioning Tesla coils out of hairpins and cutlery.
I came across an old yearbook from her convent, and within the pages of the yearbook I discovered the most extraordinary story. The girls, as usual, after evening prayer had returned to the refectory for their evening meal. No sooner had the Reverend Mother said grace before there was an extraordinary bang. Charlotte had actually blown the Sacré-Cœur dormer to bits in the course of experiments with Tesla coils.
Charlotte is promptly expelled from the nunnery. Liberated from the boundaries of a conventional education, Charlotte is free to serve apprenticeships with various physicists and chemists. It is during these years that Charlotte develops her revolutionary wave theory.
I'm Charlotte Keppel. I'm here today to talk to you about a new form of radiation I discovered. A waveform with very similar properties to light. As we all know, light travels at a speed of 186,000 miles per second. Which means, what are we, 6 feet apart?
An estimate.
It takes approximately 6 nanoseconds for the light to travel from you to me. Which means, I'm seeing you as you were 6 nanoseconds ago. The waveform that I've discovered takes approximately 5 years. To travel that same distance.
Charlotte had stumbled onto something simple yet remarkable. Like the way astronomers see events in space as they happened millions of years ago, here is a slow-traveling waveform all around us, but invisible to the human eye, that carries with it information from the past. Upon this eloquent discovery, she built the Chronoscope, a machine that can detect these waves and render scenes of history in vivid images.
The thing looks like a Heath Robinson invention. You wouldn't think it could possibly work until you see that footage. I think most people thought there was a man behind her doing all the technical work, but she did it. It sounds so futuristic, and yet all this was happening in the late 30s.
We are looking at the scientific discovery of the century. Since revealing to the world the marvels of the Chronoscope, a machine that can see the past, the charming Miss Charlotte Keppel has become internationally famed. News of her discovery has spread around the globe like wildfire. In her native city of Dublin, Miss Keppel entertains an audience of historians and dignitaries, including the Prime Minister of Era, Mr. Eamon de Valera. In London, Mr. Albert Einstein welcomes her to the International Physics Convention. And this queer fellow is Lieutenant Colonel Copcroft. Copcroft commented that what astonished him the most about the whole affair was not that this came from the mind of a woman, but that she is Irish. And here's a more sinister admirer, Dr. Heinrich Freisler, an archaeologist from the Third Reich. Freisler has already made a bid for the Chronoscope, but our girl shows that crowd a clean pair of heels. Good show, Charlotte.
Freisler was one of those odd characters who perhaps really only discovered himself in jail. It was while he was in jail doing time after the failed putsch that he discovered archaeology, and he became a self-educated archaeologist with a lot of cranky ideas.
Der Neger hat einen dickknochigen Schädel als Schutz gegen Speere und einen kräftigen Unterkiefer.
This is one of Dr. Freisler's films. He made countless such productions with his colleague of dubious academic credentials, Oswald Poppendick.
You have to remember that Germany had been defeated at the end of World War I and was desperately humiliated because they were a military nation, and they wanted to restore pride to the German people. And they needed race theories to back up their policies. So a woman who had produced a machine which, as with television, could produce images of the present, she could produce images of the past, and they could prove to the world that they were right.
Not everyone shares Dr. Freisler's enthusiasm for Charlotte and her chronoscope.
Charlotte got into trouble with the Catholic Church because it seemed her chronoscope was going to give them a view into the past when they were looking for the canonization of this man, Father Matthew. For her technology to reveal the flaws in Father Matthew was, well, it was a political disaster. Look, it wasn't long before this that the Committee for Evil Literature had promulgated a ban on references to menstruation. So can you imagine the impact this had on a society that was run by a committee against evil literature? Can you imagine?
Charlotte stokes further controversy when she insults a group of nationalist historians with images of their heroes in the 1916 Rising that don't quite match the glorified historical narrative being taught to Irish schoolchildren.
There were attempts to break up the machine. Late at night, there was ferocious pounding at the door, and masked men arrived in. They threatened to cut Charlotte's hair off, and they said that they would kick her machine from here to Cork, with her in it.
Her spirit almost broken, Charlotte nevertheless presses on with her research, despite the intrusion of the public and newspaper hacks.
My machine was built purely as a tool for scientific research. Intention is, and always has been, in the interest of science. Help us understand the truth about our past.
But on the evening of March the 9th, 1939, her work is rudely interrupted.
der Reichsmarschall heißen die berühmte Wissenschaftlerin Frau Charlotte Keppel willkommen im Deutschen Reich. Frau Keppel hat die Einladung angenommen, um den herausragenden Archäologen Dr. Heinrich Freisler bei seiner Erforschung des arischen Volkes zu unterstützen. Mit Hilfe des Chronoscopes werden sie Deutschlands glorreiche Vergangenheit aufdecken und der Welt überwältigende Bilder von der Entstehung der arischen Rasse darbieten.
Helmut Buhler was a young officer on the expedition.
Ja, diese Expedition war ein einziges Desaster. Dieses Chronoskop ließ von Dr. Freisler nichts mehr übrig. Bei Ausgrabungen zum Beispiel kamen nicht deutsche, sondern polnische Sachen zustande. Wir kamen an Städten, wo angeblich früher mal fantastische, großartige deutsche Städte gestanden hatten. Aber in dem Chronoskop konnte man nichts anderes sehen als Generationen von kleinen, fetten Menschen, die mit ihren Schweinen zusammen in Schlammhütten wohnten.
When you're dealing with myth, you're dismantling something very close to people's identity. And you cannot touch myth without being at risk, in a very real sense, sometimes of your own life.
As the months slip by, Charlotte's defiance turns to fear, as pressure mounts on her to produce a satisfactory image for the Nazi Party. A battle rages between the Nazis' desperate hunger for images to validate their philosophy and the visions provided by the Chronoscope. It reaches crisis point.
Ich döste vor mich hin und wurde plötzlich aufgeschreckt von dem Geschrei von Dr. Freisler, der behauptete, dass der Apparat von der jungen Frau sein gesamtes Lebenswerk als Archäologe zerstört. Er wurde immer wütender und begann mit seinem Haken auf das Chronoskop einzuschlagen. Und sie versuchte, das Chronoskop zu verteidigen. Aber er blieb irgendwie mit dem Haken in dem Chronoskop hängen. Es gab eine riesige Explosion. Das war das Letzte, was man von Dr. Freisler je gehört hat.
Around the world, the news of Charlotte's sentence is received with dismay. Allied leaders petition the Reich government for clemency, but their pleas fall on deaf ears. The Nazi ideologues thirst for Charlotte's blood. The prison authorities announced that Charlotte's execution is to be carried out on the following day hence. Charlotte had fashioned a Tesla coil out of bed springs, forks, and hairpins. She plugged the object into the cell's light bulb socket. It created a massive power surge The Gestapo records reveal that Charlotte crossed the border into Switzerland 2 weeks later. After this, her trail disappears.
What do I think became of Charlotte? I mean, speculation in many respects is kind of pointless in this. And there have been many mythologies and many rumours that have grown up inevitably around the figure of Charlotte Keppel.
Well, there are some theories that she went to South America, which is very ironic because that's where the war criminals went.
She was written out of history. Her technology was written out of history. And, you know, almost within a year, almost everyone had forgotten that there had been this thing called the Chronoscope, which could look back into the past. Why? Because they didn't want to know about it.
Charlotte, now quietly, and it seems deliberately, slipped forever from the public sphere. The eventual fate of the 20th century's greatest female scientist remains, to this day, a mystery.
Our history books are simply a record of the heroic deeds and follies of the ruling classes. The chronoscope is a tool of enlightenment, to shine a light into the dark, forgotten areas of our past. It has shown us that history is written by man, but that the history of mankind is written forever in light.